How's everybody doing out there in YouTube land? Another video today. Um, so I've got, in the interest of making a mea culpa or a confession. I was a Democrat for a very long time, and a very long time. I was a Democrat in terms of how I identified when I was a kid, when I was a young kid. So I was a Democrat before I could vote, and I was much more conservative as a young person than what I later grew into. And I might talk more about that in other videos, but I was a Democrat, and I didn't change party affiliation until really the day after Super Tuesday and the 2020 presidential primaries. And the reason for that, I think, is, as I've said before, was less about the management of the Democratic Party, less about the donor class, and the consultant class, and all of the things in the Democratic Party that conspire to make it difficult on, progressives, and what progressives complain about. See, the way that I view it is I view progressives like Bernie Sanders and the Squad, and, let's go ahead for sake of argument, lump in the Young Turks and Kyle Kulinski and all those people as really being honest liberals, but they're really liberals. And what that means is ideologically, they're for some form of social democracy, and maybe even a mild social democracy. They're not in the game for socialism. They're in the game for a version of regulated capitalism, which we call social democracy, when the government passes certain regulations to prevent the worst aspects, let's say, of capitalism from hurting workers and the poor. Anyway, that's their position. And there's not necessarily even 100% agreement across the people that I mentioned, but that's what they really are. The reason they're called progressives is because the rest of the party are called liberals, but in reality, that's not really the case. There's one poll, a very good poll that I saw, which indicated that only 47% of the Democratic Party identified as liberals. The rest of the party, the other 53%, I hope my math's right. I'm terrible at math. The over half of the party identifies as either moderate Democrats, whatever the hell that means. So, that's like saying seafood shrimp or something. They're either identifying themselves as moderates, or I think it's around 19% that identify themselves as conservative Democrats. Which is funny because the party itself is very, very conservative. Once you take away the veneer of we want to elect more black female politicians, and we don't want to be overtly racist or overtly homophobic or overtly transphobic, once you take away that feel-good stuff where they care about successful people who are gay or successful people who are trans, or people who already have access to healthcare, they care about those people in the management class, but they don't really do much about anything else. But once you take away that veneer, then their policies are very conservative. Their foreign policy is indistinguishable. At the moment, it's indistinguishable from the Republican Party's foreign policy. And a lot of other policies are very, very close. I don't want to go too far off here with the subject matter. But, I was a Democrat for a long time. And then the reason I wasn't was because I realized that, first of all, the liberals in the party, the people who had actual liberal positions, they no longer have those positions. And most individuals in the Democratic Party shifted to the right. And the true blue believers, the people who still are liberals, they're called progressives, but they're being held hostage. And sometimes They even buy into some of these talking points that the other conservative Democrats have, or even in England, I mean, like Mehdi Hassan, for example, who bought into the narrative that Jeremy Corbyn was an anti-Semite. To use a British example, that was a mainstream neoliberal labor attack on Jeremy Corbyn. So when Mehdi Hassan bought into that narrative and talked about it like it was a problem, and it really wasn't, it was just a propaganda construct, because nobody, the people who were complaining about anti-Semitism do not care about racism. They do not care about anti-Semitism. They care about purging the party of anybody who is mildly leftist. That's why, right? And Mehdi Hassan had to know that because he has a brain. So I give you that example to show what happens when you have somebody who's pretty progressive, it looks like Mehdi Hassan, but really he's attached to the rest of the party. You can see that, here with Jon Stewart. You can see that here with Kyle Kulinski. And even though Kulinski is a little bit different because he didn't buy into some of the aspects of Russiagate, he still covered it enough to make it seem like it's a big deal. And really, if you go right now to their channels on YouTube, if you go to the Young Turks, if you go to Kyle Kulinski, I mean, what's Kulinski talking about, right? Dave Rubin, that's a telltale sign, right? He's covering Dave Rubin. Go to Young Turks, what's he covering? He's covering some right-wing morons. I think it's Tim Pool. Tim Pool's reaction to the recent mass shooting. I mean, what do you think that's going to be, right? So that's a telltale sign of somebody who's attached to the Democratic Party, is when the going gets rough and the rough get going or whatever, they still spend half their time talking about Republicans or people who are circling around the Republican trough and trying to get scraps, like Tim Pool, like Dave Rubin, like, I don't know, what's his name, Levine, all these other clowns. That's a total waste of time. If you're covering Trump, that's almost a waste of time. I could see you covering certain aspects of him, but the reality is that this is an important principle before I get to my main point. If you go after Republicans a lot, that shows that you're really running propaganda for the Democrats. And two, if you become obsessed with how awful the Republicans are, it's going to make it twice as difficult, if not 10 times as difficult, to leave the Democratic Party. That's just a fact. Now, but my main point here is they're in La La Land. They make certain calculations that are wrong. And not only is their coverage wrong, but some of their assumptions are wrong. So, for example, what's their big assumption? That we live in a progressive country. Their mathematics, their calculus of this is the polling, which shows it's true, a very high majority, I think it's 80% of Democrats, 60% of the public, I think, 80% of the Democrats support a government role in healthcare. But what that really means is they're okay with Medicare for all. They're okay with the public option. They would support it if a candidate supports it. That's what that means. That doesn't mean, right, that they're willing to not go to the polls if they don't get it. They're not willing to stop donating to the Democratic Party if they don't get it. They're not willing to vote Republican to punish Democrats, and they're not willing to vote for independents. So they're not willing to punish the Democrats in any way if they don't get it. All of these people who are answering these polls who support Medicare for all or support the public option, almost all of them are voting for Biden, and will vote for them again. Will vote for him, Biden, again in 2024, even though Biden's not delivering anything on that. Zilch, she's giving you nothing, and yet these people are going to vote for him anyway. So you have to take that into account. The country is not progressive. I'm in California, which has a progressive reputation, and let me just tell you right now, this is not a progressive state. It's run almost completely by real estate interests. This is the sad truth, and progressives are not giving you this. Okay? That's why I'm talking about this and why they're in La La Land. I mean, this is a state that voted against gay marriage by plebiscite. This is a state that is against no-fault insurance. Every time it comes up on the ballot, it's killed. Every time anything even approaching Medicare for all, or let's say in the legislature that got killed, pharmaceutical reform, in the referendum, in our what's called our propositions, they got defeated. Every single healthcare prop that's come out has been eviscerated or defeated over the years. You can't get any real reform in this state. It's not progressive at all. I mean, you can monkey with the system here and there, but anytime a prop comes up that gives you no-fault insurance or that gives you price controls on pharmaceuticals, I mean, all you can get really is a cap on rent. So we have rent control finally, but the rent controls are on 8%, assuming that inflation isn't that bad. I mean, I know a lot of places here in California can raise their rent by 10%, and all new structures are exempted, and remodels might be, depending on the situation, unless it's an extension of a lease or something, you can charge more. So this is not the People's Republic of California, and fundamentally, progressives have made that mistake, not just regionally, but nationally, where they have read the tea leaves wrong. The reason I left the party was not because of management, was because really, Democrats are against progress. The Jim Clyburn voters, the wine moms or the soccer moms, these people don't care. They do not care. So fundamentally, their process is broken. The idea that you could go in to the Democratic Party and take it over, but not monkey with organizations or labor unions or increase the amount of poor that are registered. They're only where you're going to, I don't know what all the demographics are, but I'm going to tell you right now, there's no way there's just no way a progressive could win the presidential nomination or could win even getting into the United States Senate, being critical of Israel and being critical of Wall Street and this kind of thing. There's just no way under the current pop structure, under the current infrastructure of how it works and how it's set up, unless you change the electoral base altogether. And the current setup is always going to be against you. And how the Democrats are made up right now, when over half the party is against you, and the other half, the 47% that identify as liberals, are wishy-washy and soft, you're just not going to get anything. And when you go and look at what these progressives are talking about, they're always talking about elections and the people, you might say, election adjacent or surrounding this partisan discussion, like Dave Rubin or what's his name, Steven Crowder, or I mean, there are tons of people, most of which are completely and totally insignificant. It's just that billionaires are paying Google to keep them on rotation. That's the reality. There are rich billionaires, rich Republican billionaires that are paying those people's salaries and paying Google ads to keep eyeballs on those people. And all that liberals are doing is making it seem like those are real personalities. Excuse me, those are real personalities, right? And making people watch them more. That's all that is. And I don't understand why people like Hal Kalinske just don't wake up to this. Unless, of course, they're all on the take, and this is just all a ruse, and they're just pretending to be lefty or whatever, and this is just all an illusion and a show and kabuki theater that they've put on. I mean, maybe, but I mean, that would make more sense That would make a lot more sense than Kyle Kulinski actually not changing political views and not evolving and not using his intelligence to figure out that the Democratic Party is never, ever going to go for change up until it becomes obvious that either the party changes or elites lose their power. If that ever becomes a thing, you know what I mean? Like during the New Deal, where they had to save capitalism by implementing the New Deal. Other than that kind of situation, I do not see the party going in a progressive direction. Um, anyway, I might talk later about other things like Kenneth Mejia and all that. I mean, he became a Democrat. He went back to the Democratic Party from the Green Party. Not that I'm enthused with the Greens either. That's an entirely different kettle of fish. But I just wanted to say that because I unsubbed to both Kulinski and Cenk Uygur, and I looked at what they were offering today, and it is a mess. It's just a mess. I don't care about Dave Rubin. You know, I don't care about Steven Crowder. I don't care about Tim Pool. Stop talking about these clowns. Start talking about how you can change the dynamics by empowering the working class.